No.
All right, welcome all. I'd like to call the Board of Selectmen meeting for Monday, February 11th, 2009, into session. Before we start, would you all please stand and salute the flag?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, jumping right to scheduled items. 7 o'clock. This is a show cause hearing for Route 38 Entertainment Incorporated, DBA Mavericks Restaurant and Lounge, 212 Main Street. Do we have any representation?
Good evening. This is Doug Sears. I'm representing Mavericks Route 38 Entertainment, Inc. this evening.
Okay, very good.
Thank you for the invitation.
Very good. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read something very quickly here. I'm going to read something very quickly, and then we're going to pass it to Mr. Montori for further evidence. At that time, Mr. Sears, I'll open it up if you have any questions. Ultimately, I'll close the hearing and then allow the board to speak. So that's how we'll proceed. So I'm here to preside over the hearing for license revocation for non-payments of taxes and fees. And so what I'm going to do now is read a letter that was sent to your client, dated January 24th, 2019. Dear Mr. Proctor, the Board of Selectmen, acting in its capacity as a licensed authority, notifies you that we'll conduct a hearing to show cause why the license holder of Route 38 Entertainment, aka Mavericks Restaurant and Lounge, should be revoked for the following reasons. Richard W. Proctor, trustees, March and Main Street Realtor Trust, owner of the real estate, owns real estate taxes to the town in excess of $42,542.21. The town bylaw section 304-020 licensing authority, power and duties provide that the licensing authority may deny, revoke, or suspend any license during the renewals of any parties whose name appears on a tax collector's list of persons, corporations, or business enterprises that have neglected or refused to pay taxes, or with respect to any activity carried out on real estate owned by any party on such list. A copy of the bylaw is attached. With that being said, Mr. Montori, I'd like to pass it to you now so we can talk about the evidence of the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. So this is very simple. We have an establishment that has been a holder of a license within the town that the board grants, and the licensee owes taxes and fees in the amount of $42,542.21. I would like to present as evidence to the board tonight a list of those taxes that include real estate, water, and personal property, and just make as part of the record this list as evidence for the hearing tonight. Also, Mr. Chairman, just of note, in addition to the outstanding taxes that are owed by the establishment, we did receive a letter by hand from Attorney Sears on February 5th that stated that Mr. Proctor no longer needs the common victular license to expose, keep for sale, or to sell alcoholic beverages, and he turned in the license that day, just as a side note and separate from this hearing.
So which license is Mr. Montori, just for clarification?
That was the liquor license.
Okay,
Common victular license is called Licensed Alcoholic Beverages, licensing board of the town of Tewksbury, Massachusetts. It's a common victular license to keep, to expose, keep for sale, and to sell all alcoholic beverages to be drunk on premises.
Okay, just for the record, were there any other licenses returned or revoked?
That was the only one.
Okay, so which ones are outstanding at this point? Do we know?
I think that's everything.
Okay.
Maybe, I think does he have an entertainment license
Yes,
also?
yes. Those, I'd asked if I could have those tonight. He was going to get them to me, and we'll get these to you as soon as I get them, okay?
So I think just for the purposes of tonight's hearing, Mr. Chairman, and to the board members, there are outstanding taxes and fees owed. I would recommend that all licenses for the establishment be revoked by this board due to the outstanding taxes that are owed and fees.
Mr. Sears?
He is not continuing business as Mavericks, and he is going to get a construction loan, and it's closed for renovations, and when he gets the loan, the first thing that will be done is to pay off the outstanding taxes, because without that, that's my understanding, he won't be able to get a building permit. And when he gets a building permit, he will renovate the building for either of two end uses. Either the building will be suited for somebody who will want to rent it, or it will be sold to somebody who wants to buy it. And this is what I put in to the town manager through Janine Tamboli. And the amounts I had originally thought were, I'll just say from a teachable point, something I have learned, that there had been a sort of a process where if the license renewal applicant was not more than 12 months behind in taxes, that the license would be suitable to be renewed. But as of October 6th, I believe, 2016 town meeting, the Municipal Modernization Act, which adds to the Chapter 40, Section 57 section that's relevant to this hearing, eliminates if the town chooses to abide by this, eliminates the 12-month grace period, for lack of a better expression. And that Mr. Proctor had, as you know, a pattern of paying taxes in arrears, but due to the early expressed grace period, that was something that was able to be worked on. He was not aware of the change in the way of doing business, and is in the position that he found himself in that brings this matter before this body. So that's really where we're at.
Okay, very good. So at this point, I'd like to close the hearing portion. I'm going to open up to the board for any questions and/or any motions.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Stronach?
based on the evidence as presented by the town manager, which I believe everyone has a copy of, I move that the board finds the owner of the premises situated at 2212 Main Street, Tewksbury, Massachusetts, refused or neglected to pay real estate taxes and personal property taxes and water charges as set forth in the town collector's delinquent list of the report in the amount of $42,542.21. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to move that as a motion, and further move the board revoke the license of 38 Main Street, Route 38 Entertainment.
We'll take the first one there,
Okay.
and we'll just move in order. So, Mr. Stronach put a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second, Mr.
I
Chairman.
have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All's in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Ms. Stronach?
I further move that the board revoke the license of Route 38 Entertainment, doing business as Mavericks Bar and Grill, for non-payment of such taxes and water charges in the amount of $42,542.21.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to close the hearing?
Oh, please. Do I have a motion for
A
that?
motion to close the hearing at this time?
Second that. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. All right. We have a special guest. Is it that time? Is it 7:15? I'm sorry.
3 minutes.
3 more minutes, Mr. Robinson. Maybe we can, let's jump to item number 3. So item number 3, actually, that's a 7:50. That's a 7:50 schedule item.
Item 6 is a donation.
I was looking at, see if we have any present. So why don't we jump to, we have for order of new business, we have to accept the donation from the Board of Directors of the Tewksbury Girls Basketball League for the Tewksbury Veterans. Do we have any representation?
No, but I just think the board needs to accept the donation. We'll put it in a gift account to be used for the purposes that they've provided the gift, and we'll send a letter of thank
It
you.
was very generous. I think it was $500. I hope they don't come in later, but we can always, if they do come in, we'll give them the proper time and proper thank you. So with that said, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to accept with gratitude the donation from the Board of Directors of Tewksbury Girls Basketball League for purposes of Tewksbury veterans.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimous. And just through the town manager, just follow through with a thank you note. That was very, very kind and generous.
And it is to veterans. Just want to make sure people
Correct.
heard that. Can you pass that to the secretary and make her life easier?
To Melissa. All right, I think it's that time. Mr. Robinson, so I'm looking at 7:15. We have Representative Robinson. And just for the audience, and the residents at home,
Absolutely.
so we have done this for, Senator Feingold came in front of the board, and Representative Trump has come in front of the board, and now, not last but not least, we have Mr. Robinson coming in front of the board. So what we'd like to do, short and simple, is kind of talk about your near-term and long-term goals and visions for the town, and then the selectmen will jump in maybe with 1 or 2 questions on our own. Fair enough?
Sounds good.
Very good.
Okay. So would you like to do the topics by the inquiry that the board so kindly emailed? Or do you want me to kind of
If that
go?
works. We don't have to go too deep. I know
Sure.
a lot of us, we've already done emails and had communication, so,
Okay.
we maybe hit the priority list, which ones are low-hanging fruit, which ones you see might be challenges, and then whichever ones you may or may not cover, then the selectmen can jump in for the ones they're passionate about.
All right, sounds good. So, I'll start with perhaps the least exciting one. We'll talk about sewage, because it is something that wastewater, stormwater, drinking water is not usually debated on politically, but it is what I view one of the largest issues within the town of Tewksbury looking forward, and as well that I could think that we can make some great movement on in the short to midterm, particularly thanks to your chair here on the board. Forgive me, I shouldn't have brought 2 black binders. Raised the debt servicing issue, which I know has plagued since we invested $110 million into our wastewater system a few years back. And Rep. Maselli had a perennial bill, as I had refiled it this year under my name, and is supported by Senator Feingold and Representative Wynn, to provide sewage debt relief from the Commonwealth. And it's been a kind of an unfunded state rotating fund, but it's only given you a couple thousands of dollars from year to year. And while it chips away, it's not a fast enough rate to provide much use, especially when you count into other inflationary costs or adjustments to your municipal budget. So the bill that the 3 of us have been supporting and filed would restore this to a $4 million level, up from a couple $100,000 at most each year, with a guarantee of $400,000 upon passing and the signing of the bill by the governor, specifically for the town of Tewksbury. Tewksbury. Now, later on, and one of the things that I do expect I'll get flack for towards the beginning is that there'll be some sort of sunset provision, so Tewksbury doesn't receive $400,000 for sewage in perpetuity year to year. They're going to be questioning why don't other municipalities get on that, and I'm sure there's some other municipalities specifically within our area that will want to do so. But it is a short to mid-term potential to provide some financial relief for a particularly sticky issue that touches every business and every resident within our town. I know that you folks had to make the tough decision of water rate adjustment just recently, and I'm hoping that this $400,000 adjustment that you could put towards the debt principal would have a kind of cascading impact on savings for you.
Just for the record,
Please.
That was Mr. Johnson's big concern, being on the board for a number of years, and investing so much as a community, then receiving so little back, so.
That's it.
And that bill was just
He's a
filed
champion.
this month?
That bill, correct, was filed during our filing period, actually towards the beginning of January.
Okay.
Back when I was in the employ of the state just as a legislative aide, I took a look at a number of federal as well as other state grants and programs that we might apply for, but the vast majority of them are for residential areas under 15,000 population. The reason is that these more agricultural areas use much more damaging chemicals, which the federal government has a concern for wastewater runoff as opposed to a more developed suburb like Tewksbury, so they're not applicable. So we're in this middle ground of we need sewage to continue growing, we need sewage to create the quality of life here that residents expect of us, but we have less resources. So hopefully this bill, which I'll be meeting with Speaker DeLeo come Wednesday at 3 o'clock, told him that there's 2 priority pieces of legislation. This is one of them. As unexciting and as peanuts as it could be in a $44 billion budget, I understand that it makes a very real impact on pausing the cost of homeowners bear for sewage and water here in town. Also on that, something else I noticed when doing some research, we've reached a 73% roughly there as the last saw of folks who have signed up for sewage that we expected to, which kind of made me raise my eyebrows. So after talking to some neighbors and other folks I came across, I asked folks, I said, what was the big hurdle? And most of the time it came up to cost. Maybe there was something huge buried in the front yard, so when they called up the sewage service, on top of the $3,000 charge to connect into the sewage, they found out they had to remortgage the house 3 times in order to get the pipe connected. It's something that's revenue neutral for the Commonwealth that I'm going to file. This is not filed yet. I'm in discussion with House Counsel. But the Department of Revenue and the Department of Environmental Protection now offer a $6,000 credit towards the restoration of a failed septic system, which is great, except it doesn't include any sort of choice if they want to instead take the $6,000 credit towards their income. Now that's $6,000 over 4 years, so you can get $1,500 back a year. You can't apply that towards getting onto sewage and never having to worry about your septic system fail again. It kind of holds things status quo. I have good hopes for this bill because it will provide an incentive for folks that might come across a septic emergency who are on a sewage line making that switch over. And it might remove that large financial hurdle, which gives them a little bit of hesitation right there in the beginning.
So a rebate for the 27% remaining on.
Exactly. And I apologize, to the homeowners that have already kind of, pulled into this, but I was just kind of kicking around some ideas on what we can do to help incentivize to get us to what we projected as sustainable levels to manage our system. This is kind of a secondary part to sewage, though, but it's in the same vein. I also wanted to bring to the board's attention, it's been in the news, there's a problem with some municipal sewage upstream in the Merrimack River. 2 municipalities north, the state border being Nashua or Manchester, and then Lowell and Andover north of us, have dated municipal sewer programs and facilities. We've seen things like a 23% increase in rainfall over the previous year, and during these, what was once expected to be a 50 or 100-year weather event, just becoming more common. There's partially or just raw sewage discharge in the Merrimack. All the state delegates under the leadership of Rep. Golden over in Lowell got together and we came up with a few different bills of which I'm supporting. Most of it's notification of residents. We're discussing funding allocations, but these are lifts from what we understand from Lowell, Lawrence, and Manchester who won't even really pick up the phone. They're going to take hundreds of $millions in wastewater upgrades. It's going to be not just beyond state money, but also in the case of New Hampshire, federal monies that need to come on board. Representative Seth Moulton, our congressman, picked up the phone immediately. He's, for those watching at home that may not know, environmental issues is one of his pet projects. He's taken a concern, and he's talking to some of his colleagues from New Hampshire on what the real challenges are up there, why Manchester in particular is being combative. I also, go ahead, Mr.
I mean,
Chair.
do you know this directly impacts Tewksbury? We don't want people,
Right. Well,
you know.
there's no danger, that was going to be my next point, there's no danger to your drinking water. The majority of danger that we have is a public health concern with not only just regards to the fish and wildlife that reside within the river, but those who choose to boat or fish or swim in it. Tewksbury is, again, Tewksbury drinking water, and that is fine, it's safe, DEP checks. But that being said, for example, Mayor Holliday, who is down at Newburyport and the receiving in a lot of these discharges, he goes, if word gets out, it's going to cripple economies, it's going to cripple tourism, and it's going to give that idea that the Merrimack, after we pass the Clean Water Act, we've restored so much of the ecosystem, is now being sullied again. And that's the largest concern. But from a public health hazard, it's mitigated. There's no risk. I drink the water straight from the Tewksbury taps. No one should be hesitant to. There's no need for boiling or other additions. It's just that was kind of quasi-related to sewage overall, and I just wanted to bring it up to the board's attention. That is something the state's working at.
Mr. Chairman, just, if I may, just to follow on that, because, and I want to recognize, I appreciate your comments earlier about the first bill you referenced about some sewer relief.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what I think this board was looking for over the last few years at the state level with respect to that program. But in this case, there are indirect costs. It's also reflective in the first conversation,
right,
in that this community and the residents of this community have done the right things.
They have.
And they were ahead of their peer communities in the region. You just described a number of them. And I would argue that, you know, we just invested millions of dollars to upgrade our water treatment plant. But
That's
if
correct.
the river is more polluted than it was historically over the last decade or so, our systems now have to work harder to clean the water for the residents of Tewksbury that paid a lot of money and millions of dollars to upgrade their system. So there's almost an adverse impact on the town for doing that.
There is.
And other communities in the region have not honored that responsibility, if you will. So I applaud the effort, and I think it's something that if we can help with in terms of any kind of support,
That's without question.
we're happy to do it.
One of, and I appreciate you bringing that up because it kind of jogged a memory a little bit there. And there are some pieces of legislation which, looking forward, and they would include, in fact, Ms. Donna Higgins, who's a very active member of our community here, and a number of boards reached out with a working group for municipalities along the Merrimack, which would include a delegate from Tewksbury. Now, I presume that this bill has a good likelihood of passing. It's non-controversial, it creates a working group, set out best practices and kind of vision forward for the greater Merrimack area, both in terms of just economic development, but also for us as wastewater operators for the town. So that's something to keep in mind for you fine folks on the board is who would you like to go forth and speak up? Lowell, I will give credit, Lowell has put tens, if not probably hundreds of millions of dollars now towards upgrading. It's some of the smaller municipalities, some of the other ones, and I'm not going to speak to the particulars of them because I don't want to say, you know, Andover, for example, hasn't done anything and go out and find Andover has. But so I know for a fact some of these smaller municipalities have struggled with just the sheer cost. And it's a very unexpected thing. I'm preaching to the choir here. You know how municipal budgets are, and all of a sudden have someone come in and say, $86 million. You're going for a concrete hole to hold our wastewater and but obviously a much more complex system. So that's hence why we as a state said we each represent our own communities, but we need to approach here active as one kind of combined force and appeal to our federal government and say, this is a real impact on our area and we need some of that money we're paying and to be returned to these other communities. That's why even though I don't represent any communities which are actively discharging into the river, I'm still gonna be up there and I know you folks would be concerned as well. On to the next one? Sure. All right. Let's see. So sewage.
How about Route 38?
You want to do Route 38 next? The perennial issue. So, folks know this has been thorn in the town side for a long time. I kind of am going to combine, just like the sewage there, Route 38, and then also the issue of sidewalk and sidewalk development. We'll start with sidewalks. I know a little less than a third of Main Street is without them. There's a patchwork in front of commercial versus residential. Some sidewalks are in a state of disrepair that it might be difficult for someone who was physically handicapped to traverse it. When I received that from the board, I did some research on how sidewalks were historically funded in the Commonwealth. Mr. Kratman would know, as he works with DOT, there's a large push with our Complete Streets programs, which the DOT does, which promotes harmony among bicycle, pedestrian, and then your normal traffic, be it cars or trucks, private vehicles. Disappointingly, there seems to be a lack of state support aside from either bond bills or from within direct earmarks into our budget. Now, researching back through the bond bills, there's a few examples going back. The practicality and the reality of bond bills is that you can put anything that you want. It's getting the bonds issued on the private market, which becomes a second battle. So the state will put out, say, for the sake of argument, $50 billion in development, and I can work with the legislator and Senator Feingold and Representative Nguyen to put in, let's say, $3 million for 2.5 miles of Route 38 sidewalks, signage, slopage, and drainage on either side. And we come back with a win because it was passed and included in our bond bill. It's then up to the state treasurer to release that and then fund the project. So it's an additional hurdle ahead of time. It's been done. But she also kind of walks a political balance of trying to keep as many folks as happy as possible. And she doesn't have to necessarily fund the full amount either. She can say, Dave, well, you got $2.5 million in with the cooperation of your select board, but I'm going to give you $250,000 instead. And our project and scope will call for far, far more. What seems to be a bit more realistic is to, and as you probably remember, and I apologize just for the sheer amount of paperwork, I didn't print out 5 copies, but in the Northern Middlesex Council of Government did a study on the Route 38 corridor, and they listed particular segments. I would recommend that we have a further discussion at another select board meeting in which we target not just the sidewalks, but what we'll talk about in a minute with intersections. Because I have my opinions, and I've heard dozens and dozens of residents' opinions on what the worst section of 38 is. But we have the numbers, and we need your opinion to go forward. And then what we'll do is we can come up with concrete steps to accomplish goals piecemeal by the sidewalks. My personal opinion is that sidewalks are very important, firstly around schools and in areas that senior citizens access, and then from there on out, because typically folks around our age gap are more prone to driving unless they have children, unless they have kids on bikes, unless they themselves use bikes. So we'll target the areas of concentration first and then move out with a developed plan. That also makes things a bit easier on my end when I go forward and I advocate for something like the Complete Streets program, which is something in a couple minutes I'll urge us to take a look at and push for, because it shows that there is a formulated plan of attack put forth by the town and as well as the 31,000 residents here that we work on behalf of.
I think we actually adopted the clean
You did?
Complete Streets, but would that apply
You did.
to 38?
It can work on 38 because on the Complete Streets principles, which we'll go into in a little bit when I'm talking about the traffic portion of 38, does include components for that. And things like sidewalk expansion and that, from what I read through on the Complete Streets application and guidelines, would be doable. And in the meantime, if there's an absolute mission critical segment of sidewalk, that might be something we should keep in mind for during the budget process. The budget process, each representative and senator will get a handful of different priorities for within the district. They will award more money if it's considered something a little bit more regional. Sidewalks in Tewksbury is kind of hard to argue for regional, so I'd say that we could ask for $50,000 to $100,000 for a project that we consider absolutely critical to be realistically expecting, based on what I saw pass in previous budgets that representatives and senators preceding me requested. Keep in mind, though, also I do have to balance my budget requests from other requests you might have for other departments, as well as the town of Wilmington. So it's a balancing act, as is all things. Again, I'm preaching to the choir on this.
Every one of these bullets is going to require some dough, so.
It's the name of the game at the end of the day.
So the two different options would be go back to NIMCOG and get on the TIPS roadmap for potentially to pave, like you said, the remaining portion of 38.
Well, the good news, and not to interrupt you, Mr. Chair, is a majority of the projects in which, again, I know all of you are aware, but the majority of the TIP projects you have on the board now do include either sidewalk expansion, restoration, or something in that vein. It's something that we should keep looking for. Now, comparing, and I admit I should look to see where the sidewalks are missing versus where the TIP projects are covered, because we can cross them off our list as being completed in the near future. We won't have to allocate funding or design or planning to filling in those spots. And then we can turn to other tools and say, well, for example, 800 to 655 Main Street to 935 Main Street's missing sidewalks in front of it reliably. It's not covered under either the TIP projects slated for the near future. Dave, I think this is something that we should go forward to, and could you ask for in the budget, or Senator Feingold, could you ask for in the budget for funding? We could make some calls on what expected cost is, talk with private abutters on what they feel, and then say, okay, we'll cover and fill in this patch of sidewalk here. That's how I would recommend going about it. And I had a great conversation with a colleague of mine. Her name's Michelle Socolo. She was a town manager, I believe, for Hudson, and also a selectwoman in Lexington, if I recall. And she was a huge advocate for the development of the Complete Streets projects because she was just about transportation. She was the queen of transportation in Lexington. And based on her history, and I'm going to have some more conversations with her in a couple days, that's kind of how Lexington did so. They had one road in particular. It was a real windy road, very heavily traveled road, very developed, didn't leave much space in between the actual transportation where that tarmac ended and the building began. And it was a bit of a balancing act, but that's how Lexington approached it. They found success, and I think that's perhaps an example that the town of Tewksbury could look forward to. Now, as for the actual travel portion of Route 38, my conversations with folks, and this is something I want to come back on and hear your critiques and your advisement, seems to be two kind of separated places, one that has a little more time before it gets worse, and then one that's just terrible now. Again, if you remember the 2014 Route 38 corridor study, the first segment, which is awful now, has two failing intersections, is from South Street and Main crosses down to Shawsheen and Main. Actually, kind of, that traffic pains is kind of edging up towards Livingston Street. You remember Shawsheen in Maine was redone a little while to square up the geometry and to try to improve traffic flow, and while that did abate the increase for a little while, did kind of mitigate the timing, that's moving towards a failing grade, as well as one which is actually going to be covered by a TIP project, which is the 3 intersections up by the Walgreens, which is right, exactly. So I know that's slated to come up. I reached out to Dan Fielding at the Department of Transportation to see that if perhaps advocating for that in the bond bill, because bonds are more likely to be approved if there's a blessed state plan and one that the municipality signed off. The state treasurer, she'll love that, because it means that she's just not issuing bond money on the private market off to a dream which may or not become a reality. Shows that we have skin in the game and we put work and blood, sweat, and tear equity towards it. He's going to see what I can do to financially advocate for that program. And even though it's not quite her district, I'll pull Trom into it, as well as Senator Feingold, and say that it's taken people 9, 10, 12, 15 minutes during peak hours to get from near the Wilmington line to Market Basket. And it's only going to get worse with this Dascom project going on, which is something else we'll cover, because I feel that everyone that lives in that Andover development on the Dascom road border is going to come to our Market Basket anyways, or pass through that intersection anyways. As you know, a little further upstream on 38, there will be a potential constraint with the Representative Maselli Bridge that does provide an engineering challenge if we're going to talk about either expanding the road to allow for more turn lanes, or how far back that goes. Something else I asked Dan Fielding and his team to take a look at. And again, just for the record, Dan Fielding is the District 4 legislative liaison for the House of Representatives there, as well as kind of how to alleviate without pushing the traffic into people's neighborhoods. The last thing I want is for folks to get fed up with Route 38 or to see what it's a more appealing route, or what we refer to as the route Waze recommends, that takes them down South Street or River.
Yeah.
It does.
So that's why I say Whipple's the new Main Street, and East Street's the new Main Street. So you're right, that's what we're feeling and seeing.
Walking down Brown Street, there was 3 or 4 times where I saw the good Lord, because people passed so close to me, I thought that was the end of it. And, you know, I'm an 8-foot-tall guy. How you miss me driving along, I don't know, but it just shows you the volume and speed of the traffic there. So that first segment, but I also had a fair amount of folks, and again, this is just something for Mr. Chair, you and your board to keep in mind. There seems to be a particular amount of frustration for those exiting the Market Basket Plaza, just because, again, the volume of growth, the people coming in and out, stopping, taking the left, has become difficult. One of the proposals, which, again, this has been nothing but someone mentioned, but I promised them I'd bring it to the board, was working with the folks at Market Basket with a second travel lane on the side of 38. So you could come down Shawsheen from Andover, take a right and make it all the way to Livingston. So folks who are taking the right out of Market Basket and are getting up to speed, or taking a right out of McDonald's and getting up to speed, aren't slowing down traffic, because speed differentials, the Delta D, is one of the biggest causes of traffic. It's just scientifically, and what that happens is it creates a ripple effect back through that intersection, creates a ripple effect for everyone trying to get out of the Mobile Station, out of the Knights of Columbus, out of all the way up to Donna's Donuts, and it creates a seismic shock, which only exacerbates traffic backwards. Now, how does that affect people taking a left, coming down from Main Street from the direction of the post office? Do we need lightage? I don't think lightage that close with the major intersection will be functional. Again, these are just ideas I want to run past you and the board, because we're here to represent the residents. I know that's where your hearts are. And so it's something that we should consider more. But I do want to bring attention, this is one of the ideas, though, that NMCOG did hand to us back when they did the Route 38 corridor study. Further down.
Any idea how long ago?
2014.
2014.
Yeah, the 2014 study, and I have an electronic copy here, so I'm happy to leave the copy on this. But yeah, it was done February 14. The projections of growth are pretty spot on. I mean, we had a little surprising amounts of growth, I think, that were unanticipated for some smaller but still sizable developments. The other place we have a little bit of breathing room on, but is going to be approaching an issue again, is the 495-93 exchange. That is holding steady. Again, Mr. Kratman knows perhaps best than anyone else. They assign letter grades, just like our old report cards, and they did an upgrade on that, but it's mentioned in the 14 study, and it's mentioned in some things since, that there's going to be some growing pains down there, especially if there's a proposed housing development that will add a lot of chaos to around that neck of the woods. So that's something to be aware of, and something that we should take a look at when it comes to our Route 38 development plans. But just to kind of finish up what I say, and this was coincidentally, they refer to it as Segment 6 in the NMCOG 2014 traffic study, is what I personally feel is the worst part of 38, and that's a stretch, again, in front of Jim Boudreau's and Dandelions and the like.
Any questions, comments? I know Dave said a lot. I mean, my takeaway here is... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, please.
Okay, so you mentioned a lot, but there's a couple of things that we can work with. One of the things that we did with yourself, Representative Maselli, Senator Battalion at the time,
right,
we did not get a Mass Works grant for the intersection of where they're building the Circle House.
Right.
But they ended there's a project that's already been approved on the tip that goes from Colonial to Old Boston Road.
That's right.
We had drafted a letter from the town to the delegation asking them to go to Mass DOT to at least extend the limits from Colonial to go down to where the school is, because where they're ending the project, it absolutely makes no sense.
That's...
What's happening is that they're putting sidewalks and bicycle accommodations to make it healthy transportation, right, but yet it ends at a place where there's no sidewalks on either side of the street.
Right, it terminates...
So you're leaving people out there on a blind curve with no sidewalks in either direction. So
that's right.
if we were able to at least extend that, and every year, you know how the TIP project goes.
That's right.
Every single year the TIP project goes through, there are people that are scheduled to get TIP money, but their project isn't designed, or there's something, or maybe they have two projects at the same time, something got delayed, so they didn't start this project. So at the end of the year, money becomes available.
That's correct.
So that's where we have to keep our eye on the ball.
That's absolutely right.
Much in the same way as we were able to, like the other end of 38, where we got from Wilmington to the police station, that wasn't on any tip.
Right, yeah, the segment 7 section.
There was funds available, we worked with Representative Maselli, he drafted a letter, went through the delegation, and because there was funds left at the end of the year, they came and resurfaced it. That wasn't on the tip, that was a nothing.
That's-
So they were able to come through and do that. That's
Right.
where we have to keep our eye open.
If I remember, that last segment was some of the TIP projects came in under budget and ahead of schedule, and they're able to roll over the money, like you said, that wasn't initially on the program. And you're right, it's project 608297, I was going to bore you with numbers, is the one from Colonial up to Old Boston Road. And I did ask him about increasing the scope to Victor Drive. The little hesitation on the engineering's half, and if the board would like me, I'm happy to go back. I didn't want to kind of rock the boat on that, because as the engineers were so far developed in the other parts of the segment, I didn't want them to come back and say, all right, Dave, we honored your request, but now if we're taking it in the Victor Drive segment, we're going to extend out. We're going to kick back the year to maybe instead of a 2021 expected completion, it's now going to be 2022, which means that Circle Health and the units on the right side of Victor Drive are going to be developed, and we're going to be overwhelmed for an even additional 9 months, a year, however long it would be take for them to kind of catch up. The Victor Drive intersection, you're right, the Mass Works is something I glossed over, but it is something that we do have in mind. It's something that we should keep in mind for some of the large projects, which I'm going to go on later on with potential of affordable housing. Mass Works is a program that looks to fund areas which are kind of choked via economic or residential development with a focus on low-income to moderate housing. It's a great opportunity, I think, to kind of kill two birds with one stone. If we are going to develop any sort of town-based or town-led affordable housing along the Route 38 corridor to mitigate traffic and actually improve traffic flow for that area. That's going to be a long project, and that's kind of semi-related with affordable housing. So, Mr. Chair, I'll entertain any other questions before we move on to affordable housing.
I just have one last thing. I don't want to
Please.
talk about all the transportation, but there are a couple of things I want to.
Please.
There is another source for funding for sidewalks. Each district in the state gets a maintenance contract for sidewalks that comes through. So it's only a couple $1 million, which is like in District 4, it's broken up in
Right.
62 cities and towns. But as we are doing each development that's going in through town, we are insisting that everything gets approved through the planning board. That's a major development on 38. We have them put sidewalks in.
Right, yes.
Those do not connect. So there are parcels, as we've been moving along and these developments are happening, there are short sections that aren't completed.
You're right. You're right.
If we were to go and say, and bring a design saying, can you fill in this spot, which granted they only have $2 million a year, but it may only cost them $40,000 to fill in this section.
Right, and I know,
Those are those certain parts that if we got the delegation to draft a letter saying, here's a spot, and we'll work along with you to say.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What we need, but that's something that we would definitely be able to.
everyone on this board, and I know working with Jim back in the day, Mr. Crabman, you were a champion of that, and it's been done piecemeal, and you and your various boards under your leadership are right to realize that if there's a hot market and there's a great commercial investment coming in, that sidewalks are pennies on the dollar, and it insulates from either the residents or the other commercial properties that are already developed, already have sidewalks, from paying it through a betterment or something along those lines. Just looking at the cost, and the maintenance fund is something we can explore with it, but just doing a bit of research on what other municipalities similar to our kind of density and what the costs are there, especially as sidewalks through more rural areas tend to, they get put in quicker, but you know, the residents per serve sometimes makes the cost to the point where the residents balk at it, whether you're asking the private landowner to or the residents as a whole. So even Lexington's more dense than us, so I'm worried sometimes that the maintenance will be a good way to fill in the piecemeal, but for some of those longer stretches, I was just looking for funding sources which had a little more meat on the bones, so to speak, so that I don't have to tell you that, well, I got enough money to make it halfway down Market Basket's curb, and then from then on out, you're just going to have to put your snowshoes on and get your hiking boots ready.
All right, very good. Any, I know we're probably coming up against the clock here, so we want to touch on a couple more bullet points or areas of focus.
Absolutely. So, you know what? Just in case we go over, and I do have to beg the board's pardon because Wilmington is having their capital outlook meeting tonight too, which is something I do have to make, albeit late. I'll bring up the update on the state land transfer issue, and then library maintenance. And because the library maintenance, the state land transfer, and then we'll do the state hospital reimbursement, because I want to ask for your opinion. And if you'd like, I'm happy to return at the next Board of Selectmen meeting, kill off the rest of our topics of discussion, and get any answers to any question you have, and be back here in 2 weeks. Does that sound good to the board, sir? All right. So state land transfer issue, it's something before I was sworn in, but in that kind of odd period, I met with Mr. Montori and Mr. Sadwick, who have been on top of this issue for a long, long time. Not Mr. Montori particularly, but I think it's an issue that Tewksbury faced before I was even gracing this town with my presence, I dare say. And it's something that we call DCAM with. Tomorrow we are going to have an update. It should be finalized for DCAM to finally surrender the deed of Livingston Street to the town. It was a bit of madness. They told me initially that had to do with an emergency access gate, to which I replied, what access gate? So they said, I don't know. They found that gate. Things kind of got caught up on the back end. We had a wonderful phone call with Mr. Montori representing the town, with Senator Feingold, with Representative Nguyen and I, and they agreed that tomorrow they'll have an update and we should have a final end date where you, the select board, can hold the title for Livingston Street in the hands. It should be said and done. This is far too long overdue. I get pretty angry about it because it's a simple bureaucracy holdup and it's just frankly inefficient and shameful it took this long. But there's some good news on that front. And then when it comes to the Tewksbury Cemetery expansion, frustrating, but we're going through it again. I took Representative Maselli's bill filed. For those at home who may not know, there was disagreement between the state delegation, the town of Tewksbury, on what should be considered fair compensation to the state for Tewksbury Hospital land adjacent to our cemetery to expand burial plots. Now, for the sake of viewers at home, they can imagine that this is a landlocked piece of land. It's either the school, the state hospital, town-owned land, or private development on all sides. And the Division of Capital Asset Maintenance and Management, who oversees state land, was arguing that this is a prime place for condos, even though it's not. The site is in desperate need of cleanup, and to be honest with you, I don't want anyone living on those grounds, but it makes a great spot for burial because it's in quite nice shape, and when folks have already passed on, there's not too much concern about things like wastewater, presence, or what have you, to an extent. And we'll take care of all that. But Senator Feingold and I sat down with Representative Nguyen again. We refiled Representative Maselli's bill, which forces now, because there's an option that we determined through our own internal counsel, which we were worried that the DCAM commissioner might choose not to surrender the land to Tewksbury, so we made it a a must transfer the land instead of may transfer the land for nominal cost. This kind of ties in with something else that we'll go into, but the uncompensated 911 responses to the hospital, we use this as leverage to say, look, the fire department alone was putting over $250,000 in calls. They got a little less than $100 grand back over the last handful of budgets at best. Tewksbury's out of millions of dollars. We're going to hold this in perpetuity as a cemetery. It will never become condos. The deed you receive will always require it to be a cemetery, which they need the land, and it won't be used for private development. And the folks at DCAM seem much more accepting of this bill. There's no disagreement between Representative or Senator Italians, which cited two different costs the town of Tewksbury would have borne before, which caused some confusion moving through the legislative process. The bills are identical. And we're going to pursue DCAM with them. That's the other bill I'll be speaking to Speaker DeLeo about come Wednesday, is just saying, look, at this rate, we're going to have to bury them feet first if we don't get some movement on this. It's unused land. The CEO of the state hospital said that she foresees no use for it. We elected to not use it for elementary school purposes. Let's move forward and just get this over and done with. So that's that, and then it's...
Can I just make one comment?
Oh, yeah, please.
One last thing, to give you some ammunition when you're going in there.
Love it.
Last year, we used town funds to fund cleanup of Tewksbury State Hospital. So we actually took out funds to maintain state land. And
That's...
so when they're arguing and saying that, this is something that's going on, We can get you the exact numbers, but under last year's budget, we actually put money aside to take care of, because the state wasn't doing the job.
Right, and I'd love to have that, because it does provide ammo, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Mr. Kratman. Something else, too, that the board should make note of, and Mr. Montori was on the phone call as well, advocating for the interests of the town, in addition to your legislative delegation, was the question of what to do with the old police station parcel. And the town has spent some remedial costs cleaning up and discharging, and DCAM, it's not written. I'm on the type that it's on my to-do list until we have the signed and sealed legal document in front of us. But DCAM did believe it was fair when Mr. Montori raised your opinions that, hey, we're supposed to split the cost 50-50 when it comes to the sale, as the original land transfer from the state asked for. But we put more skin in the game cleaning this up for use. And DCAM said, tentatively, and we're going to look at it and give it our legal blessings, but it does sound like it's fair for us to, when we sell, give you the $850,000, whatever the final tally is, reasonably so, that the town spent on cleaning up this property out of our end, because you're the folks that went forward and did the work, and you're the reason that we can get this off of our roster of unused state land and put it towards something productive, which I understand might be towards something with affordable housing. We'll come back to that at a later meeting if we're coming up on the time crunch.
And volunteers as well. You can't emphasize how many volunteers go down there as well.
It's remarkable.
Cost and volunteers.
110% of Tewksbury volunteers. It's amazing. There's folks where you put out things for even just clean up on 38 corridor, and you see kids from 6 to residents 60 years of age out there on a hot day.
Impressive. Mr. Marshall, did you have something?
I was just going to say the town appropriated $39,000 to clean up the Pine Cemetery that Mr. Kratman's referencing, to cut trees down and clear out some areas. And they're asking for another $4,200 at this town meeting for the removal of poison ivy. I did raise this issue with the DCAM staff, so they had that also for information as they were going through this land transfer.
Okay.
And is that through community preservation money?
It
I
is.
just wanted to make sure that.
It is
it's
community
not under
preservation
general-
funds.
I don't want people to think we're paying it out of the general fund.
Community preservation.
Thank you.
And we have some metrics, right, Mr. Montori, and reports that maybe we can help our cause, because all these items
so.
here are going to cost us money.
That's right.
And if we can generate some additional revenue through the state hospital because of 911, fire, police, first responders, coupled with some of the other projects in town, I think that would give you a little bit of leverage. So I don't want to kind of trade land. I'm thinking extra revenues should be coming down the pike. I think that's a low-hanging fruit. So we can work with this Montori to give you some supporting data.
Right. And that's something I did want to come forward to, and that's something that I would like the board, whether you executive session it or however you'd like to discuss it. Again, Tewksbury Fire spent about $250,000 responding back when they met with Rep. Maselli and Deb Toss, the CEO of the hospital, DPH, DMH folks. I presume since DPH has a police force there, we still serve them.
We do.
And, right, arrestable offenses, someone becomes a flight risk, harm risk, or what have you. I don't expect the cost to Chief Sheehan and the men and women there to be near $250,000, but sizable. We have a way out, though, of now, this does provide leverage, again, when we were dealing with DCAM and Livingston Street, DCAM with the cemetery, and it will provide leverage for things such as capital investments with our fire department, especially when we begin to execute our town center design.
I think the residents, it's beyond leverage now. It's just, it is what it was. It is what it is, so to speak. We have to need to revisit that and start and get compensated accordingly. So
You tell me.
It's going to be a big one for us, because I think it can pay for a lot of the things we're talking about here. Sidewalks, wow, we get additional funding we can allocate to sidewalks as opposed to going to the taxpayers. So
Right.
Revenue opportunity here, way overdue, and it's time to.
Yeah, and I think if it's a revenue opportunity in this case, and after all, you are the stewards of the town, I would ask and urge that we consider it, maybe putting it towards either the fire department, because I know Chief Hazel has used the reimbursement to him for equipment upgrades, including the potential provision of some more vehicles due to Tewksbury's increasing. I mean, we're trying to be self-reliant instead of relying on mutual coverage. And with the increase in medical calls, with an aging population in town, with a lot of first-time families moving in, we're going to see a population boom that necessitates a third or maybe even fourth ambulance down the line, especially as the Route 38 traffic continues to increase. It's going to become a response time problem. It's the growth that we, along with our other municipalities in the outer ring of Boston, are encouraging. For the first time, we're having, well, not for the first time, but a lot of our towns are seeing growth in traffic rates unprecedented to prior decades, even though our population growth plateaus because more folks are moving out of the Boston area. Thankfully, the urban core is promoting housing development on a state level, and it's something they're looking at, which should help alleviate our housing market a bit. But even I'm having trouble finding a place where I can get a down payment on it with a good income without some sort of mortgage requirement. So our market's still in demand. People are still coming up all the way to Tewksbury because they look at the schools, they look at the safety, they look at your town finances and what the 5 of you are doing for the future, and they go, hey, this looks like a real good place to live. Let's move here. And we welcome them as Tewksbury residents do, but there'll be some growing pains. So I'm getting away from it, though. If we want to approach the state hospital, I'll have some conversations to see if that's something that the state hospital itself will do a line item on. Is it from DMH, DPH? I just ask that the board would consider preservation towards our since it's being reimbursed for 911 costs, that be, you consider, and you could tell me whatever you want at the end of the day, or the residents, but I would ask that we perhaps consider that either towards the upgrades at the fire station or Chief Hazel and Chief Sheen's equipment, or for opioids. Unfortunately, I have some disappointing news on opioids, or you can tell me time's up.
Maybe just cover that, because we do have some
Sure.
folks that are impatiently.
Sure. So I did some extensive research with BSAS about provisions, and I just want to ask some clarification from the board on, so I was asked by the board, it said,
Additional
where is it?
opiates.
Yes, thank you. And when you ask for additional funding for police support, I was just, and forgive me, I should ask for clarification. I kind of started to bite off more than I could chew. Are you looking for community outreach done by Chief Sheehan? Is it for more manpower, Narcan trading? Because there's a whole slew of different projects at different levels of funding. And I just want to know, and I'll come back in 2 weeks with what exactly you're looking for me to kind of catch and bring to the table, and can advise you and your fellow members, Mr. Chair, on that.
From the board? I mean, I could, Mr. Stronach?
I'm sure that all of us have a different outlook on this, but I think overall, the opiate crisis has affected every aspect of this community, whether it be education of our families.
Right.
I mean, everybody knows Chief Sheehan and his departments and their work on this, and we're absolutely on cutting edge.
That's right.
And if you are saying, what else do we need? What we're
Please.
saying is, what else do we need to stop this? And the best way that we can approach this is education, and I know that he has added to his staff, and Mr. Montori can speak to that in terms of counselors and professional development of his team. And is it a nurse that he?
He's a clinician.
A clinician.
And he has another staff member.
And those people are working with families within our community, and then the work that he's doing within the school department in terms of that whole week, which is basically turned into a month now.
Right.
Of activities, and we just need to continue to hammer that stuff home. So
Sure.
when we say, what do we need for additional funding, I think it's to expand what is already looked upon as a pretty solid and tight program, but it's still not enough. As much as people point to Tewksbury and say, wow, look at the things they're doing, it's still not enough to combat the problem.
Absolutely.
I don't know if anybody else wants to.
And I didn't mean to clarify. I again, aware of all the wonderful things. I just wanted to know if there was one thing in specific to support, because when BSAS returned the phone call, and for those who may not, BSAS is the acronym for the Bureau of Substance Abuse Services, and they made aware. I just want to get us, kind of be looking for a specific avenue, but instead get overwhelmed with options and perhaps miss opportunities.
I'd say all the above in all programs. If you give Chief Sheehan money, you know he's going to put it to good use to fight this.
Sure.
Fight this.
Sure.
What was the disappointment that you?
Well, the disappointment seems to be, yeah, absolutely. The disappointment I found within the state is we went through something that was called the Chapter 55 study, which took a comprehensive look among law enforcement, medical professionals, and social professionals over the last few years, and they put forward a series of recommendations. One of the biggest things that we have on kind of preventing this is it prevents cross-doctor shopping, and it also expanded the continuum of care from detox to these independent living centers to get the men and women who fought this battle and have succeeded back into the workforce, right? So our idea is to take someone entirely opioid or alcohol dependent, put them in, and then work with them over the next 18 months to relearn their habits. And the state took a focus on that because it requires some heavy lifting and some heavy funding. And municipalities that were hardest hit, to be frank with you, were mostly gateway cities that could not afford to do this through their own local Department of Public Health. So the state took a much more regional approach and an educational approach. Aside, what I was a bit disappointed with, and it's something that I need to do a lot of research on because this is opening up a whole Pandora's box of different law enforcement ideas, but it seemed like other than what do we do when we come across fentanyl or another opioid derivative, and understanding on how to refer people to the drug courts, there wasn't much support for our men and women in law enforcement on what we can do. Now, Governor Baker and the legislature did a lot of work. In fact, the pie they cut off was pretty ambitious the last term, and that's what born this Chapter 55 program, and I know we're going to come back to it again. My question is, now that we kind of, we responded to the initial flood of opiates, and we're getting folks off the street in numbers, which are now helping to level out, how do we prevent these people from even reaching there in the first place? Because we can have all the detox beds in the world, but to me, that's no different than having as many airbags in your car, but not trying to find out why we went off the road to begin with. I tend to agree with Ms. Stronach. I think education is a huge component of it. When I was an undergraduate at UMass Amherst, there was nothing I could not have gotten my hands on if I didn't try hard enough. But it was my education from my coaches, my civic leaders, my teachers from the police department growing up that I knew, despite peer pressure, that this was a bad idea. And so I absolutely agree there's the educational component, but I just wanted to make sure that I didn't go chasing down something and have the board say, Dave, you got it all wrong.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow on that, because I've heard a couple of things tonight that raise the question, while we're all intimately involved and understand kind of at a 30,000-foot level, when it comes to this issue, and if you're asking for prioritization of what you want to fight for in terms of resources for Tewksbury, through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the town manager to go directly to the expert, who is our police chief, and ask for his opinion, and then bring that back through here to the representative and the other members of our delegation. We're on the periphery, he's on the front lines, and this is an important topic that if we need to create a list of here's the top 3 or 4 or 5 things that in order of magnitude or priority, none of us, with all due respect, are capable of addressing that. It should be the police chief. And just to piggyback on that, I'd like to ask through you, Mr. Chairman, to the town manager again. It concerned me a little bit, as Representative Robertson described, the wish list of expanding sidewalks and complete streets down to Victor Drive. If we push hard on that, and that's going to jeopardize the existing program in any timeline, we ought to have the opinion of our engineering staff and those people who are working on that project before we as a board begin to ask the delegation to take further steps. I applaud the concept, and I agree with Mr. Kratman completely that common sense says it should be connected. But we have a project on the schedule. We don't want to jeopardize that at all, and we ought to make sure that, again, the people that we pay every day to do this stuff competently at least weigh in for us so we can make educated decisions.
Very good. And just to add, you might want to include the fire, the chief of fire, the superintendent.
Agreed.
So let's,
Agreed.
We'll ask all the experts and come back to you. So we took a lot of notes. I'm sure we'll
Please
communicate via email and over the phone. We'll try to boil this down. And we'll
anytime
have you in a future Board of Selectmen meetings. We can summarize and kind of provide, where we're at, what we've done, based on our words and our actions, and kind of where we're at.
And may I ask, Mr. Chair, if I could be kept in the loop? I'd take time out of my day as well to meet if Mr. Montori deems it let me know. I'm happy to come and meet with the chiefs in person as well. It might save you some hassle. I know all 5 of you, himself, Mr. Sadwick, are busy as can be anyways. So if I can alleviate that workload a little, let me know. I'll be there.
Very good, looking forward to it. All right, thank you very much.
See you in 2 weeks.
Appreciate the
See you in a
detail.
couple of weeks.
All right, I'll see you in a
Have
couple
fun
of
in
weeks.
Wilmington.
Thank you.
A little bit behind schedule, but we're going to jump right in. So let's move to 750 Slate, entertainment license applications, Papagino's Incorporated, 553 Main Street. Have any representation? Seeing none. This is a public hearing, so I have a motion to waive the public reading.
Make a motion to waive the public reading.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I think from the board, this one's pretty straightforward. I think it's has to do with jukeboxes. As a matter of fact, Papagino's came in front of us a few weeks ago and did it to similar stores. This one is just for the jukebox, so, and all the paperwork was in line. So, any questions from the board? Comments? What is the pleasure of the board?
I would like to make a motion to approve the entertainment license application for Papagino's at 553 Main Street.
Actually, before we do that, I'm trying to rush. Are there any abutters that would like to
Thank
approach the
you.
microphone at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Ms. Stronach, do I have a motion?
Thank you. Yes, I have a motion to accept approve the entertainment application for Papagino's at 553 Main Street as presented.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye opposed, carries unanimous. Next, we have on the agenda here, we're going to, we should have had the proper naming, so we have a liquor license transfer. On the agenda, it reads Tewksbury Convenience Store. However, it should read Shiva International Incorporated to Tara Sam's Incorporated. Do we have someone present? Please approach the front and just name and title for the record, please.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Attorney Tom Truax of Salem, Massachusetts, on behalf of the proposed transferee. To my immediate right is go ahead.
Yogesh Patel.
And to his further right,
Tara Patel.
Mr. Yogesh Patel is the president of the corporation, the treasurer of the corporation. He's also a 50% shareholder in the corporation. Mrs. Patel is a secretary of the corporation. She's also a 50% shareholder in the corporation, and she's also the proposed license manager. The underlying transaction is a purchase and sale of not only the business, Tewksbury Market, but it's also a transfer of the real estate. So there is financing involved in this. Salem 5 Cent Savings Bank is financing the real estate, and the seller is providing financing for the business. The seller's attorney just provided me with a copy of the proposed the proposed promissory note, and I've handed that to the secretary. In terms of experience, with Mr. Yogesh Patel, he comes before you with over 11 years of experience having worked in the package store business. He currently has interest in 3 package stores. The one that he has the most interest in is in Natick, where he is the manager. He is also tip certified, and so he's very familiar with the process. He will be working there on a part-time basis. He will not be a full-time person there. But on the times that he will be there, which is mostly the weekends, he will be coming before you, having worked in that type of environment for many, many years. Now, Mrs. Patel comes before you with even more experience, though not as much experience. She has worked at this particular store for over 26 years, since its inception in 1996. She's only been working part-time at the store because she had a full-time job during this period of time. She is now transitioning to a full-time job with this store upon the purchase of the store. And therefore she will be her primary hours will still be the weekends, which is what she was working before, and she will also be working mostly afternoons and evenings. As I said, she has 26 years, another 11 years. We have about 37 years of experience going into this process. So I think there'll be a smooth transition from the current owner to the new owner, and be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Before we do that, are there any abutters that would like to speak? Seeing none. At this point, I'm going to open it up to the board. Questions, comments?
Is, so what, the owners own 3 existing?
Well, he has an interest in 3. So he had to pay the obligatory $5,000 to the ABCC because of his 4th interest.
And when's the completion of the sale scheduled?
It'll be within, the purchase and sale agreement, well, the bank will be ready, but it's subject, obviously, to the ABCC. They've done their appraisal, they've done their environmental, so it's strictly going to be after the ABC is approved, CC is approved. It's usually typically about 2 weeks after that they're able to close on the whole transaction. It'll be, business and real estate, the whole thing.
Business and real estate, yep. And the convenience store, that's beer and wine?
It's a package store, beer and wine convenience store, yep.
Hard liquor?
No, just beer and wine.
Okay. And, yeah, that's all the questions. I just wanted to get an idea on what's going on.
Ms. Stark?
I'd just like to say that it is a very thick package that we had to review, and I am not an attorney, but it appeared that everything looked in order to me, and I believe that our town council has reviewed this and has informed us that everything is in order as well. So thank you for your due diligence and your work on this. It's great to see that it's
You're welcome.
staying, so.
Mr. Johnson?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman. I assume you might speak specifically to the concerns that we've had as a board relative to service to minors. I'll let you touch on that if you're willing.
Mr. Kratman?
I was just going to do that, but seeing that you're going to do it, so I'll stop in there.
You've been quiet tonight. So first and foremost, yes, welcome to Tewksbury. So this is not your first rodeo, right? You have 4 stores, and you've been working at one liquor. We call it a liquor store. To Mr. Dick's point, it's beer and wine, correct? A convenience store, essentially, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Have you had any issues with serving minors at all?
No.
Okay. So that's real big in Tewksbury. We're the stewards of these licenses, and in the last couple of years, we've had some incidents throughout our town where they've served minors, not asking for ID, even when they have the ID scanner. Oh, by the way, do you have an ID scanner too? Do you know? Do you operate your store with an ID scanner?
No, we don't have. We just checked ID manually.
Okay. Any thought about getting a scanner?
We can get the scanners, but all the scanners also not foolproof.
No, but you're still taking I think it's pretty easy for a clerk to take the license and scan it, as opposed to looking at it, and then it's hooked up to computer software where it's going to determine whether that's valid or not valid. So
We don't have, but we can, install it. We can bring it in.
I would say it'd be highly recommended. I know other stores in our community have them. They work well when the clerk actually takes the ID and scans it. But again, I just really want to caution you that we did have a problem in town. We addressed it with the stores, so we kind of give a very firm warning and a welcome warning in the same sentence, because that's how serious we take that in town.
Yeah, it should be serious. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, at this point, what's the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the liquor license transfer to Tewksbury Convenience Store.
Okay. I'm actually just going to add in there, Mr. Brian Dick, I'm going to add, so the motion is the liquor license transfer to Shriv International to Tara Sam Corporation. Is that correct? So that will be the motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
You do.
I have a second. Any discussion?
I'd just like to say that this is subject to a higher authority than us, so.
Of course.
I just want to make that clear for people in case this doesn't happen.
Okay, very good. So I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. So thank you very much, and welcome to the community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
All right, 8:15, we have a National Grid poll petition, Woburn Street plan. Just name for the record, please.
My name's Dave Aguirre, and I'm representing National Grid.
can maybe just describe this body of work?
Oh, sure. National Grid is asking the town of Tewksbury for permission to relocate a pole, pole 2 Woburn Street. The reason for relocating this pole is that, as of right now, it's in the middle of a proposed driveway to these two buildings.
I've read the material. Any questions or comments from the board? Ms. Stronach?
Same question we always ask, Dave. What's going to happen to the other pole?
Oh, that's going to be removed. That pole that's there right now is in the middle of the driveway. That pole's going.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very good.
There's one gone.
There's one. Many more to go. That said, what's the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion to approve the National Grid pole petition on Woburn Street Plan number 274965253.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Melissa, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very
I
much.
apologize
Thanks.
for the timing delay on
no
previous
worries.
weeks, but we got it right. We got it done.
I'm sorry for the phone going off. New phone. I
You're
couldn't
good,
figure
you're
out how to
good.
shut that off.
You're good. It happens.
Thank you.
Very good.
I like your ring.
This brings us to the residents section. Would any residents like to speak at this time? Seeing none? Okay, we're going to move to new business. We've already approved the very nice donation from the girls, Tewksbury Girls Basketball League towards our Tewksbury veterans. And just for the record here, we also have, it's new business, it's item number 7. It's one-day liquor license application, Lowell 5 Cent Saving Bank. As it turns out, they don't need to come in front of the board for the license, so strike that from the record. Next, boards and committees. And Mr. Montori, I'm going to defer to you for this one here, just for give us some background.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One committee in particular I'd ask the board to consider making appointments to tonight, and that is the Local Historic District Study Committee, which the board formed this past fall. We went through the process of seeking any individuals who are interested in being on the new committee. We look to include a realtor from the local Realtors Association, as well as an architect. We did not get interest from either one of those groups, so if there was not interest from either one of those groups, it could default to residents within the community. We do have 5 individuals who are interested in serving on the committee that the board is familiar with and I believe has interviewed in the past. They are Nancy Reed, Linda Votor, Jacob Little, Tom Churchill, and William Wyatt. All of them have been involved in town boards and committees in the past. 4 of them, Mrs. Reed, Votor, Wyatt, and Churchill are already active on the Historic Commission. And if the board is okay, I'd recommend that they be appointed to the committee this evening so they can start their work on the Local Historic District Study Committee.
What would the term be? Is that till June?
I think it would go to probably June, but
And then reappoint.
and then you can reappoint it.
Right.
At least they can get going.
Because only have a handful, well, okay. So that would go through June 2019. I forget, I think it's the
I just want to
29th.
check, make sure.
And you mentioned those are 5 individuals, 5 folks there. Are there additional vacancies? Mr. Montori?
No, it's only a 5-member board,
Very good.
so June 30th is fine.
June 30th, okay. Do you have a motion? Questions?
I would make a motion that we appoint the 5 individuals recommended and who have applied, since we are very familiar with their work and they are very committed to this process to get this under. We've been trying to move this along for a little while, so I'm really excited to finally get this moving, and I would recommend that all 5 of them be appointed for a term to serve June 30th, to expire June 30th, 2019.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, Melissa. Thank you.
The town clerk's office will contact them?
No, we will.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Mr. Montori, it's going to bring us down to town manager.
So the next item on the agenda, The next item on the agenda, Mr. Chairman, is the insertion of town election ballot questions. There are 4 that I presented to the board in the past. I believe there are copies in your packet. I'd ask the board to approve the insertion of these questions on the local election in April. The first is the debt exclusion for the elementary school project. The second is a non-binding referendum question for recreational marijuana cultivation. The third is a non-binding referendum question for recreational marijuana research. And the last is a non-binding referendum question, recreational marijuana manufacturing. I'd ask that all of these be added to the ballot in April. I may come back to the board for another debt exclusion question regarding the demolition of the 2 elementary schools that will be replaced by the new elementary school project. That cannot be part of the debt exclusion that you're voting tonight. That would have to be a separate question. The elementary school building committee is still discussing that particular issue, and we're still doing some we're looking into that issue to see if it should come forward now or wait, and there will be time at your next meeting to make that decision. So we can at least get these 4 on the ballot and then come back if needed and if at all with the other question.
Questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, I just like how, we're allowing these, we're thinking about these questions. We've talked a lot about it, and we're allowing the residents to weigh in again. Obviously on the debt exclusion, such a big project, so, they're going to be able to weigh in on all this important information, and it's not, just this board making the decision. So I like that process, and I know the questions have been discussed and thought out thoroughly by the town manager and this board, so I support this.
Do I have a motion?
Before.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Stronach, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So I would just like to note for the record that the debt exclusion question, on top of having to go to DOR, the Department of Revenue, this also had to be approved by MSBA, which we didn't have last time when we looked at this question. Mm-hmm. And it's my understanding that they did approve this to go forward the way it is.
They did.
So I just want to make sure you all were aware of that, because that's brand new, hot off the press information. And then I agree with Selectman Dick very much so about these questions, but I did get a lot of questions about the non-binding, and if there was the ability for us as a town to do similar to what the state does with the question, to have like a little explanation on the ballot. And unfortunately, we do not have the ability to do that. So I don't want people to think that we did not think about that. We did. We, through the town manager, did some work on that. So we may be putting stuff out. If people want information, they should contact the town manager's office for that information. But the questions are the way they are going to appear on the ballot without an explanation, which people might be accustomed to because of the state's ballot. So I just want, am I right?
That's correct. So Selectman Stronach had reached out to me earlier on this issue, and unless a town has accepted Chapter 53, Section 18B, they can't put an explanation or a summary under the ballot question. So we haven't done that, so we cannot provide that information on the non-binding referendum questions.
How about the dollars, too? I know the last meeting we talked about you can't...
Yeah, it's very strict with the both Department of Revenue and MSBA, mainly because if you do put a dollar amount and you need to come back for further appropriation, that means you'll have to go back to the ballot itself. So town meeting will set the dollar amount.
Okay, correct. But I know residents are going to ask, there's no dollar signs associated with this, with the ballot question. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just, Mr. Chairman, just as a takeaway, I'd like to ask through you to Mr. Montori, not a fire burning here, but would you investigate the benefits, pros and cons of adoption of that particular statute, chapter, what was it, 53?
Yes, Section 18B.
And maybe come back at a later date with a recommendation. We're going to have questions like this down the road, certainly in debt exclusion. We've done a number of them, and we'll have more.
Yeah, I think
Can't do
the
it when
statute, it really is only for non-binding.
Non-binding.
Yeah.
Be positive, yeah.
But I'll double check on that, and we can definitely look into it.
We
the
ought to
pros
look
and
at
cons.
that and just be ahead of that, so down the road, maybe there's an option that may benefit the voters if we were to adopt that.
Sure. Let me get past town meeting.
Okay.
And
What's the pleasure of the board for the question?
If the board could just vote on whatever the motion is, that I'm going to send this to town council and senior town council once more, just to make sure there's no tweaks, but
Okay.
they've already looked at it and everything looks good, so it's always subject to their final review. No questions.
That said, do I have a motion on the floor?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the insertion of questions on the town election ballot for the debt exclusion for the elementary school project and the non-binding referendum question for recreational marijuana cultivation, research, and manufacturing.
A through D, right?
A through D.
A through D, all right, very good. I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second, all's in favor? Aye. Opposed, unanimous, Melissa.
Next, Mr. Chairman, is I brought forward the possibility of creating a committee to look at the future reuse of the Trahan and the North Street Elementary Schools. I provided the board with a mission statement for that committee, and I wasn't sure if the board had.
Was that shared with the school committee?
Yes, and everyone, it seemed to
Okay.
be okay.
And in the planning board as well?
I did not with the planning board, I believe. I believe it was just with the school. I sent it to the school chair. I think the school committee members, yeah.
Okay. And I think there would be a member, I don't have the actual makeup.
It will include a member, it would include a member of the planning board?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe just take an action, let's get that out to the planning board folks as well, just for awareness.
Sure.
Okay, and we're kind of looking to get this committee kind of up and going, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind, I would like to say that the elementary building committee has looked at this. Eric is a sitting member of that who is on the planning board as well. And while this was not shared with the planning board, I think it was more important to share it with the school committee, because the school committee actually would have to relinquish the properties over to the town before we were able to take any action. I would be remiss if I didn't provide you with the sense of urgency around this article, around this committee. And the reason for that is because we're looking at whether or not one of the discussions that we're having is the demolition of these two, the possibilities of the demolition. And the building committee feels very strongly as a group that this really needs to be outside of our purview. And we do not, as you know from what we've had discussion on, we do not believe that we should be contained on that. So I have no problem giving this to the planning board later if they want to make some adjustments to it, but there is a planning board member on there as well as some residents, and I would like to make a motion that we move this committee forward. And I was also, I'm going to throw my hat in, actually I wanted to ask if you would chair that be the appointed selectman, but I have a sense of urgency around this committee. I don't know.
I don't know about sharing it, but,
Well,
I do have, I am on just an IMCOG board, I do have some cycles, so I would be more than willing. And I
it
know
is your neighborhood, so I was thinking.
it's all our neighborhood.
Mr. Chair, I do think, I agree with Selectwoman Stronach on this committee. I think it's something where the town managers put some time into a mission statement, and I think it is imperative to start moving forward. I think there's going to be a lot of questions around that, and if we can get that committee to start looking in to those questions and, well thought out process moving forward, I think we need to move forward with that tonight, and I would support you as the representative on that committee.
Is that enough, folks? I have a motion.
I'm going to make that as a motion that we move forward to establish the North Street and Trahan Elementary School Future Use Committee.
motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Now, that was for the formation of the committee,
That was
correct?
for the formation of
Correct,
the committee.
okay.
And then we have to appoint someone to that committee, is that correct? Mr.?
One member, yes.
So I'm going to make another motion. I'm going to make a motion that we nominate Mr. Jay Kelly to be the Board of Selectmen representative on that elementary school future use committee. That's quite a mouthful.
That was. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, Melissa? Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Hopefully you wanted to do that, Mr. Kelly.
Oh, I'm intrigued. I mean, you know, like, this is huge for the residents. I mean, let's explore
Thank you.
any and all options, you know, no options off the table, and it's,
We can't wait.
I think the Ms. Stronach said, you know, and I know Mr. Kratman has a lot of experience in dealing with stuff, so we're going to bring everyone in. You know, this is going to be a group effort for sure, so.
Excellent.
All right, next on the
Thank you.
agenda, Mr. Montori, Dascom Road update. This is a big one as well for the community here.
I'm trying to hand out something for the board. Just be brief. So just a couple of things. Just to recap the project, the development of the Dascom Road project in Andover is at 146 Dascom Road. It's being developed by the owner of the land is Sal Lupoli, Lupoli Properties. The applicant is proposing to redevelop a 16.2 acre site by demolishing the existing 200,000 square foot building that's on site and construct 524,000 square feet of development containing a mix of hotel, retail, restaurants, fitness center, grocery store, and professional office. The proposed development consists of the following: 66,000 square foot, 100-room business-centric hotel, 80,000 square foot retail, 20,000 square foot restaurants, 30,000 square foot fitness center, a 35,000 square foot grocery store, 293,000 square feet of professional office. I've attached a map for the board, just so you have an idea of the layout. And then also I've attached two letters. One was a memorandum that was sent by Assistant Manager Steve Sabick, who attended an Andover Planning Board meeting where he provided comments to the Planning Board. And another is a letter that we sent to Secretary Matthew Beaton Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, the MEPR office, regarding our comments to the project. And in both cases, just so for the public's knowledge, the areas that we're asking for review and mitigation. The first is in regard to the signalization at Shawsheen, East Street and Dascom Road. We're also asking for sidewalks to be installed, approximately 1 mile of sidewalks on the east side of I-93, located on the west side of I-93 that provides 0.15 miles on the westerly direction. The town of Tewksbury is requesting that there be some parity in the sidewalk installation for the project. More specifically, Tewksbury would like the applicant to construct sidewalks on East Street from Gills Way to Leston Street at approximately 1,100 linear feet, and on Shawsheen Street from 1636 Shawsheen Street to Vale Street at approximately 1,600 linear feet. And we commented that this would significantly enhance the safety of pedestrian movement from the local neighborhoods to the proposed facility in light of the fact that the facility will increase traffic along both roadways. We want the railroad crossings reviewed. There are 2 at-grade Pan Am Railroad crossings in Tewksbury within the vicinity of the project. The Shawsheen crossing is approximately 1,400 feet from Shawsheen East and Dascom. The crossing, there is another railroad crossing at East Street, approximately 3,600 feet from the intersection, and we want an analysis done on the traffic delays because of those crossings. In regard to the signalization that I mentioned earlier, with the controller for this intersection being relocated, the town of Tewksbury would like the applicant to address the radius of the turn lane on from Shawshene Street to Dascom Road. As the intersection is currently configured, trucks have to cross into the opposing traffic lane to make a right turn onto Dascom Road. The added traffic to Dascom Road corridor would only exacerbate the existing conditions. We want an analysis of Vale Street and Shawshene Street. The Vale Street and Shawshene intersection is unsignalized and has some geometric deficiencies. Vale Street becomes Tewksbury Street in Andover and is a cut-through when the road is fully operational. There is a bridge repair project that currently has Tewksbury Street reduced to one lane. The town is concerned that once the bridge is fully operational, Vale and Tewksbury Streets will see increased traffic to avoid the project area of Dascom Road. Tewksbury requests that the capacity of Vale Street be reviewed based on the projections and that mitigation measures be undertaken for the street as well as the intersection of Vale and Shawshene. We also want the town of Andover to support a limited truck exclusion on East Street. There is increased traffic on East Street for trucks utilizing or cutting through and not utilizing 93. We have an increased amount of trucks that come down off of 495 down 38 to East Street, mostly for Market Basket, and we'd ask that there be a truck exclusion from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. to give residents in that area some relief. In order to have this truck exclusion imposed, the town of Andover has to approve the truck exclusion. We have funded and paid for a study to be done by an engineering firm that recommends the exclusion be implemented. But the town of Andover will not support the exclusion, so we need them to do that, and we made that part of our comments. And then finally, any sewer connections that 146 has to Dascom to the town of Tewksbury sewer system, we'd ask that those connections be terminated and that and disconnected for all the buildings, and that we update all our agreements with them. And that's it.
I have some questions, but let me open up the board for questions, comments. Mr. Stronach?
So it's, first of all, thank you for doing that. I would also like to just take a minute to give a shout out to Selectmen Crapman and Vinnie Fratellia from the Planning Board, who have done a lot of, made themselves frequent visitors of these meetings, and especially during the day. And I certainly appreciate that, so that they know, and I know that you've been involved in a lot of the night meetings as well as Steve Sadwick and the town manager, but I think it's really important because this project is not in Tewksbury. And we are relying on another community to be a good neighbor. And I am hoping that that be the case. I certainly am pleased that we have our comments in, but my question is, what is the response from Andover Ben to the town manager and the board?
On these comments?
Yes.
Yeah, we have, well, I can tell you on the truck exclusion, they were no, and that's been going on for a couple of years, so they have not been cooperative in that area. But we have not heard anything else on the other comments.
And what is they have a fairly new town manager over there?
I don't know if it's fairly new, it's a few years.
Okay, and are they responsive? I'm going to take that as there's room for improvement. Okay, thank you. I have no other questions, but I just want to say, I think that this is really important.
Any other questions or comments?
I just want to bring up a comment, Mr. Chair. Yeah, well, attending these meetings, not only is that all these questions, a lot of these were all brought up by the residents, the neighbors, everybody's going through their business owners, members of boards. And one of the other things that we brought up also was during construction affairs of what's going on out there, because I'm sure a lot of residents are going to have that concern. But we brought that to them as well at the public meeting, that while this is under construction, Waves and every other app is going to tell every truck that this is not the way to go, because it's going to give them the fastest route of what's going on. So this is not something that's going to be built overnight. This will probably take a year. So that headache of sending trucks down 495 to 38 to travel the length of 38 to East Street to get there, so specifically Market Basket and all that. We do know that Market Basket's been very good about telling their own truck drivers specifically, do not use East Street, but it's all the vendors that go to those places and all the other businesses as well, with California Paints, Restaurant Depot, everything else that goes up there. But we did give our concerns about during the construction of the vehicles going this way. And hopefully if we get this truck exclusion, we can alleviate some of that. To the town manager, didn't they reach out to us on something for a truck exclusion as well?
It was in another part of it. It was in another area that we were involved in, and we haven't given the approval.
Yeah, but they asked us for a truck exclusion.
Yeah, I don't know if they went through the formal studies. They broached the subject with us, and our response was not until we get the truck exclusion that we want.
Yeah. And as part of this, we had to bring up all these questions here because what their original proposal was very limited work proposed to the town of Tewksbury. They were going to do slight sidewalk improvements, no widenings, no configurations, nothing to go along with this. So I thank the town, specifically Steve Sadwick, our town engineer, for being out there and fighting for all the things that we need for our community. This is going to be detrimental to our streets when it gets built and the work that's going to do. The neighbors are all concerned. They should be. And this is going to bring a lot of traffic to that area. I know they got a $6 million Mass Works grant to do this infrastructure, so they're using state funds to be building this, and all that state fund should not be just spent in Andover. It should be helping the residents of Tewksbury. We have to put up with this added traffic that's going to be going through our streets. So that's all I have.
Okay. So we have letter number 1 that you, from Steve Sadwick. You know, we have letter number 2 through you to the through Secretary Beaton with no response. So I think there's a meeting tomorrow at, I believe, I think it's in Andover, 8 o'clock for the planning board meeting. And I think that's the last public hearing potentially on this matter. So I guess the question is, you know, we reached out, tried to be neighborly, and haven't got too much feedback, good, bad, or indifferent.
We're always neighborly.
Yeah, we're always neighborly. So, I mean, I'm planning to go tomorrow to the Andover meeting, planning board meeting, but what else can we do? You know, I can go tomorrow and read the letters again, and you know, what else can we do? Seems like we're at the 11th hour, I guess. You know, if these guys go ahead and make a vote tomorrow, I'm hoping they get snowed out, well, by the way, but, you know, in lieu of that, you know, what else can we do, you know, for Tewksbury to say, hey, you know, we have concerns, and Mark brought up a good one here, the construction, you know, that wasn't noted, you know, the noise, the dust. So I know this is really top of mind for a lot of residents. I said we've been fighting, we've been working, but at the end of the day, we're not getting much of a response either.
Right. I mean, the letter to Secretary Beaton just went in this past week, so that's going to take some time to hear a response from the state. We can make sure those letters get in the hands of our delegation so they can follow up with the Secretary. And we'll just try to reiterate our concerns to the planning board in Andover. And Steve Sadwick has a good working relationship with his counterpart over there, so we'll just keep pushing. And they have been, gracious enough to let us know when there have been meetings and to include us into any internal review meetings. So we'll continue to push that angle.
Okay. So maybe we'll work, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson.
Just, I know you mentioned Mr. Montori, and it's clear in the letter relative to the Daskin Road, East Street, Shawshene Street intersection there. But I don't know if there's not a wrinkle to add to our concerns there. That signalization and the intersection literally was just completed not that long ago.
Correct.
So there's got to be a component here that deals with the the costs that we put into that as a community and the Commonwealth put into it, and to get a return on that investment. Here we are, a matter of maybe a couple of years later, and we're drastically affecting that intersection. That seems against the grain. So I don't know if there's a way to wordsmith this to add that component to it, but it's kind of throwing good money away. If we just invested as a Commonwealth a lot of money to improve that intersection for travelers, and now we're effectively, potentially going to have a detrimental effect on it.
We'll see what we can do on that.
Just another angle.
Ms. Stronach? Good point.
It just hit me like a light bulb going off when Mark talked about the $6 million in the Mass Works, and our representative was talking about that. Is there any pressure that we can put on those individuals to say that some of that money has to get earmarked towards us? I don't know if that's possible, but
I'm not sure there would be. That grant has been in place for a couple of years. I think it goes back to the original concepts that they had for that land. And I'm not sure, but most of it's going to go to extending the sewer line to the project. There might be some other components to it, but I'm just not sure.
Mr. Kravman?
Yeah, I have just one, something else slipped my mind, I just wanted to bring up. One of the other concerns that we don't have in there has nothing to do with this development, but behind this development, there's another very large parcel of land. And a lot of the Andover residents were talking about this. The reason it hasn't been developed is because they have a cap on how much septic they can have out in the town. So they haven't developed it because there was no water or sewer to that area. If this gets built, now they are bringing sewer down there. So now that opens that whole large parcel for potential residential development, where in the past there was nothing for them to connect to. Now that DuPont properties that's behind there, that'll probably be, once once everything comes down to that area, that now that development will be able to tie into that, and that'll allow that development to build another very substantial traffic generation behind there. So this is not just one project that we have to worry about. There's an additional project.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm not familiar with that parcel of land, but that's an excellent point Mr. Kravman brought up, and we also should be aware that Hewlett-Packard has 80 acres of undeveloped land that they are now bringing forward for a combination of retail, commercial, and residential.
can you repeat that?
Hewlett-Packard, which I believe is across the street, has 80 acres of land that is not developed, that they have conceptual plans to develop housing, commercial, and retail, which will further
Where
impact
is
this area.
that also sits in Andover? I just want to be clear that
That's closer to our line.
when
Yes.
the residents hear this, that we don't have 80 acres, that Andover has
No.
80 acres that is
It's in
under
Andover.
conception.
Conceptual planning. So to Mr. Kravman's point, the possibilities out there really can increase twofold compared to what Mr. Lupoli is doing.
Can I ask one question, Mr. Chair? So, just so I understand, Mr. Montori, this letter was given to the Andover Planning Board back on the 8th of January,
Yes, Mr. Sawick went to their meeting and presented the letter.
and there was no response?
No, they just took the information and like they
Said
would,
thanks
like any.
for coming?
Yeah, but I think that would be normal at that point to make those, just to accept the information, and hopefully tomorrow night they could incorporate some of it into their findings.
So is this so we're hoping tomorrow night there'll be some discussion around these items?
Hopefully.
And the town manager over in Andover, he's aware of these, or?
I'm not sure how involved the selectmen and town manager are involved in this. This is a planning board issue, and everything's in front of the planning board at the moment. Sure, they're aware of the project, how up to speed they are on any comments from Tewksbury at this point. It's hard to say.
As we're good neighbors, and, when we ask for the exclusion, or we talk to other towns to do other things, I mean, you talk to, I'm sure you're aware of things that Andover is asking for, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on occasion.
Or whatever, but
Yeah.
I just find it weird that, it's January 8th letter, there's been no follow-up. Basically, we're hoping, and we've sent the other letter to the secretary, which is good. But I don't know, I just find it hard that that we're not getting any type of response. Don't you? Or, I mean, not to put you on the spot.
No, I mean, I'm not, no, I'm not
Like,
that
they can't be
surprised.
sympathetic. I think this board and you would be sympathetic to if it was reversed.
Yeah, I mean,
We would hear about it.
I believe you would.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of a play going on.
There could be.
And for, on the truck exclusion, and I know that's been like a 2-year issue, what was the reason why they just said no?
So in the beginning, they felt that with this project taking place at 146 Dascom Road, they just weren't in a position to agree to the truck exclusion because they didn't know how this project would affect them, so they wanted to hold off. I had a subsequent meeting with the town manager asking him to reconsider, and I never heard a response. And I know at the time, our representative, Lyons, was active trying to get an answer, and he would report back that there was, they just weren't interested in the truck exclusion, so.
Yeah. So I don't think it's you or your staff or Steve or whatever. I just think for us not to get some type of word back from the planning board in over a month and the town manager or just somebody just saying, hey, we understand your concerns. Mr. Johnson brought up a good point on that intersection. I just find it mind-blowing that other towns that are going to need us down the road for other things don't want to play in the sandbox. It's very disappointing. And hopefully tomorrow it'll be a better meeting.
Yeah, and I'll have Steve Sawick follow up to see if there is any response at this time or what they're thinking, but nothing formal has been sent to us.
That's what I was just going to put a bow on this. So why don't we, Mr. Montori, could you take the action to follow up, not only Steve Sawick, to follow up, saying, you know, listen, we put it in front of the board. We have been getting updates, with all fairness. They have been working this, but, you know, now it seems like we're, you know, our time is shrinking here. But we'll have Mr. Sawick follow up with the planning board. But could you also follow up with the town manager and
Sure.
say, wait a minute, time out. You have a meeting tonight. You know, we presented these letters in good faith, haven't
Sure.
got a response, and Tewksbury's not happy.
Sure.
And I just want to, sorry, Mr. Johnson, I just want to be clear, I'm not, you know, I think the letter's great. I'm glad we're reaching out to multiple parties.
Sure. And with all fairness, let's just put, we go to the meeting tomorrow, and they might have addressed some of these. We just
It
don't
could.
know.
It
So,
could. We just haven't heard.
right.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, the correspondence of January 8 is issued through the town manager's office to the Andover Planning Board. Correspondence of February 7, again from the town manager on the town of Tewksbury's behalf to Secretary Beaton. I'd like to offer a motion just that this board go on record to endorse both of those letters and what they speak to.
Without question.
So there's a documented record in the minutes, and if the town manager feels it would be beneficial, he can draft a letter that reflects the vote of this board to endorse those two letters. I don't know that it would make a difference, but I think hearing that the Board of Selectmen is supportive in principle to the things that are stated in both letters, it can't hurt.
Do you want to go further and forward them to the Board of Selectmen in Andover tomorrow?
I was
Please.
thinking the
Yep, we can
same
do that.
thing.
Can do
So
that.
I'll
So
amend
they'll
my
have them in their
motion
hands.
to include that provision.
Okay, very good. I have
I'll
a motion.
draft a cover letter.
I'll second that.
A motion, and I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And in the interest of doing this quickly, you're going to sign the letter and say that it's from us, so
behalf of the
that you
Board of
don't have to worry about getting signatures.
We'll do it first thing in the morning.
I took some notes. I'm just going to add one extra.
Unanimous vote.
Yeah, unanimous vote. I'm just going to add what Mr. Kratman said about construction, noise, dust, hearing, you know, heavy
As an
machinery,
added
and hours of operation.
And I think,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Johnson's comment on that intersection 2 years ago, and now we're putting it to its test with this new development. I think that would be a good thing to put in there.
Work it out.
And I know Mr. Montori took those notes, so. Right,
Correct.
in addition.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Senior Town Council invoice, December 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd ask the board approve an invoice in the amount of $4,440 for senior town council's December bill.
So moved, Mr.
I have a
Chairman.
motion, I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, unanimous. Melissa.
And then finally, town council's invoice for January 1st through January 15th in the amount of $3,187.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. And I think that brings us to minutes, October 16th, 2018. Mr. Brian Dick.
Mr. Chair, we have to approve some minutes tonight for the regular session meeting. I'd like to make a motion to approve regular session, October 16, 2018, as submitted.
A motion, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. I think that concludes the minutes, and now it brings us to board member reports. Mr. Todd Johnson.
I looked up too quick, I guess. Huh?
Yeah.
Three things, Mr. Chairman. On the 25th of February at the Tewksbury Public Library, there will be a community roundtable. It's the first time that will be offered in Tewksbury, and it's designed to bring together organizations in town that offer services to the community. The residents are invited to attend and gather information. And I will be there representing the Tewksbury Community Pantry, but many other organizations presumably will be present that evening. So would welcome interested parties to come and attend that event. The Community Preservation Committee met this week and voted to put favorable recommendations forward for articles for consideration in the May town meeting involving lighting, 2 areas of lighting, the tennis courts and basketball courts on Livingston Street, the East Street Little League or baseball fields. Significant lighting expenditures. These follow on the prior appropriation that was approved some time ago for the other lighting along Livingston Street fields. Earlier tonight, the town manager mentioned the Tewksbury State Hospital Cemetery, continuation of an effort through volunteerism to eliminate or eradicate extensive poison ivy in the area after some trees were cut. That's $4,000 and a little bit more than $4,000. And then another area that was approved for consideration and go forward to town meeting is architectural consulting for the Ella Fleming School. So, historical building in town that we want to move forward with some type of a plan on. So we're asking town meeting through the Community Preservation Committee to appropriate funds to begin that process. And then the last item I'll mention is the zoning bylaw subcommittee continues to work. They met last week and actually met this evening while we've been in this room to continue the process. And we'll have an update on what transpired this evening when we meet next. Thank you.
Mr. Mark Kratman?
I'll be short and sweet. The beautification committee hasn't met in the last 2 weeks, so we have nothing to update on that. Economic development, we haven't met in the last 2 weeks, but we propose to have a meeting shortly. We're waiting for an update from MCOG on the business design guide that they're working on. And once we get that in, we'll schedule a meeting. On the Lowell Regional Transit Board, I'm glad to announce that we're looking to increase services. We're looking to put Sunday service in. We're applying for additional grants through the state to try to do that. We're also been approved and have ordered the bus shelter that is going to go in by the senior center, by the senior housing on Livingston Street. There's a place there, I think I brought it up in one of the previous meetings, that we have a couple of handicapped people that are getting off the bus. There is no safe spot for them to get off the bus, so the town is building additional sidewalks down there. We're going to put handicap ramps on both sides put a crosswalk there. The new lighting that we're installing down there will help dramatically, and the Lowell Regional Transit is buying a new bus shelter so that the residents can be seen and better lit down there and have a shelter so that they can get on when doing it. So that should be installed in the spring, as soon as we coordinate with the DPW.
Very good. Ms. Stronach?
Looking at my calendar, Wednesday is the local housing, what, the date?
I'm not sure.
Okay. It's next Wednesday, it's this Wednesday night.
13th.
The 13th, thank you. I'm bad with dates, I'm just going to say it again. And the events committee is getting ready to do the fall baseball, so that stuff will be coming very shortly, and they're working hard on that. Elementary Building Committee is having a meeting at the Senior Center on February 20th at 10 o'clock in the morning to start the outreach there, as well as a whole bunch of other community outreaches. They will be in the schools, at the library, and the Senior Center. So keep your eye on the town calendar, and we'll be having those on those message boards if you're connected to the town's website. So please keep your eye out. And we are very excited that this Wednesday, which is February 13th as well, that we are going in front of the MSBA to finalize the last numbers. Everything has been submitted. We believe that we should have no hiccups at that meeting. And once that's done, we'll have the plan with all the solid numbers, so then we can start answering the question of what this does to taxpayers, and we'll work on that piece of it. So lots of information to come, and that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Oh, wait, happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh, I thought that was directed just to me.
I'm on the Elementary Athletic Field Subcommittee. 2 Sundays ago, I was asked to do a presentation in front of a community group. It was about 40 people to explain what is being proposed for the athletic field. So it was a good working session where there were some questions, and good information was handed out to the community. So I thought that was a positive to get the community involved and to get the word out on some of that building that's being proposed. That's it.
Very good. Just on my end, short and sweet. On a happy note, Mr. Nick Brooks achieved his Eagle Scout. That's the highest ranking badge you can get within the Scout organization. And so a shout out to Troop 47. I know, hopefully, if they're watching. So it's always a privilege and an honor to go to an event like that, a ceremony, because it's that cool. I mean, they put so much dedication and work in. So good job, Nick. And that's all I got. With that said, do I have a motion to adjourn? I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you guys very much.